but we were surprised, that our presidents, a few of our president, the previous president, he went to the Prime Minister as well and discussed a few things related to the construction industry and some other industries as well, and it got a really positive response from the Prime Minister himself. So we're hoping, that if as soon the right people that you listen to, if you listen to the right people, you'll make policies that will be helpful in not only, promoting the businesses as well, and when the businesses will grow, your tax collection will increase as well.
Definitely, when you talk about construction, there are so many businesses associated and related with it, like more than 40, 45, this is what they claim. And the Prime Minister's main focus is about construction because it is going to give support to so many other sectors, cement, brick making for that matter. And, it generates a lot of job opportunities also. But anyway, let's see where it leads. But as long as they're in the right direction, without that, the overall pace isn't that fast. But I think that's the global approach these days, that things are not moving in the right direction for many countries for that matter. Look what USA is going through, such a big economy.
Especially that we need to survive this storm that we're in.
So I think, Mughal Sahib, next 1 year would be very important. I think that is going to make it or break it. I mean, that is also going to declare the direction. But anyway, Mughal Sahib, it was a pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much. Mehtab Sahib, it was a pleasure having you too. And our friend Qayyum Sarari Sahib, was great to have you in our show as well. And that's all we have for this week. I'll see you inshallah tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.
Passion for polo will be the highest on the world's highest polo ground. Chandur invites visitors to experience a traditional polo tournament between the teams of Chitral and Gilgit. The tournament is held on Chandur Pass, the highest polo ground in the world, at 3,700 meters above sea level. The first time a polo tournament took place on the Chandur Pass was in 1936. It is a place unique and exotic in itself, surrounded by some of the most spectacular mountain scenery in the world. The event marks the annual rivalry between the teams of Chitral and Gilgit. The polo tournament has some added attractions for the visitors: trout fishing at the nearby streams and lakes, and a festival of folk dances and music of northern Pakistan. The event in itself offers a fascinating insight into the lifestyle of the people of this region. Their culture and indigenous customs are a delight to behold for the visitors. Crystal clear lakes, snow-covered mountains, alpine flowers, and vast stretches of green grass are added attractions. Fairs and festivals of Pakistan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to BDB World News. I'm Shazad Qayyum with the top stories of this hour. Prime Minister Imran Khan assigns targets to various ministries to improve governance and prioritize projects. Imran Khan says power sector is the biggest challenge to provide affordable electricity to consumers. Prime Minister Imran Khan expresses satisfaction over improved economic indicators of the country, says current account surplus again in November was $447 million. Federal Cabinet approves 6th Census Report for final approval of Council of Common Interest. Federal Information Minister Shivdi Paral says the Cabinet also permitted Interior Ministry to amend ECL rules. A 50-year-old woman embraces martyrdom in unprovoked firing by Indian troops at the line of control. A 4-year minor among 3 citizens also injured in the deliberate targeting of civil population by the occupying Indian troops. Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa says Indian provocations, particularly recent targeting of UN military observers' vehicles, are a threat to regional peace and stability. The U.S. House of Representatives passes a $900 billion coronavirus aid package aimed at throwing a lifeline to the nation's pandemic-battered economy, clearing the way for Senate approval. Pakistan beat New Zealand by 4 wickets in the third and last T20 international to end the series on a positive note, but still lost the series 2. In Napier, Mohammad Rizwan scored 89 runs. PTV Sports telecast the match live. But that's all for the moment. For more details and live streaming, log on to our website world.ptv.com.pk. You can find us on Facebook page with the name of PTV World and follow us on Twitter at WorldPTV. Coming up next is Politics Today with Farooq Qasafi. Stay tuned to watch.
The Faisal Mosque is the largest mosque in Pakistan. Located in the national capital city of Islamabad. Completed in 1986, it was designed by Turkish architect Vedat Daloki to be shaped like a desert Bedouin's tent. It is situated at the north end of Faisal Avenue, putting it at the northernmost end of the city and the foot of the Margala Hills, the westernmost foothills of the Himalayas. It is located on an elevated area of land against a picturesque backdrop of the Margala Hills. This enviable location represents the mosque's great importance and allows it to be seen from miles around, day and night. The Faisal Mosque is conceived as the national mosque of Pakistan and is named after the late King Faisal bin Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia, who supported and financed the project. It is the largest mosque in South Asia in the world. The Faisal Mosque was the largest mosque in the world from 1986 until 1993. when it was overtaken in size upon the completion of the Hassan II Mosque in Casablanca, Morocco. Subsequent expansions of the Masjid al-Haram, the Grand Mosque of Mecca, and the Masjid al-Nabi, the Prophet's Mosque in Medina, Saudi Arabia during the 1990s, relegated Faisal Mosque to 4th place in terms of size. Architectural wonders of Pakistan.
Magla Hills, the heaven of Islamabad. The abode of God, a place where you can explore your soul and meet power of natural elegance of mountains. Spread over an area of 12,605 hectares, the Magla Range, the foothills of Himalayas, are youngest hills with an age of 5,000 years old. Magla Hills are home to around 600 plant species, 250 bird varieties, 38 mammals and 13 species of reptiles. Magla Range is characterized by many valleys, scenic spots and beautiful water streams, especially in the monsoon months. Famous for their tranquil environment and lush green natural splendor, Magla Hills are a particular source of pride, harmony and spiritual delight. For the residents of Islamabad, many of whom make it a weekly ritual to scale the various trails to Damanikovo and Pir Suhawa. Magla Hills send off its visitors with lasting trail of memories to relish in solitude and provide an escape from the relentless rhythm of life.
Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farooq Pitafi. Today we are going to talk about politics, but it is not domestic politics. It is, you can call it geopolitics, but unfortunately, because the country in this context is an irrational actor these days, I don't know whether it is wise to call it geopolitics. I'm talking about India. India under Modi is a gift that keeps giving. Repeatedly, we have seen many revelations which are astounding. One was Disinfo Lab, an NGO based in Europe, exposed a huge number of Indian fake websites. Remember this thing, the US President repeatedly talks about fake media. And here we are talking about literally fake media, 750 fake media outlets that were based in the 119 countries of the world and were peddling Indian propaganda. And that propaganda has continued. Indian websites of this sort usually are very easy to locate and understand because they claim to be international media organizations, but they mostly are either focusing on the local politics or then India-Pakistan politics, where they keep on building up India and keep on undermining Pakistan and other countries in the region. There's one aspect that one has to talk about. Then remember, recently FinCEN also a data dump was released, and in that also we found out that many Indian banks were a part of this ring to actually spend money or launder money in support of terrorism or similar kind of attitudes. Then you have seen what is going on a line of control between India and Pakistan. India keeps on attacking line of control, and day before yesterday they actually attacked a vehicle of UNMOGIP, United Nations observers here. And that is not all. India keeps on upping the ante. Even today they have been attacking LOC, and we know that across LOC they even killed a Pakistani, a Kashmiri citizen, an elderly woman. We are going to talk about all these matters. I want to understand this entire thing is going on. How is it that the world doesn't notice? The Disinfo Lab is not Pakistani organization, nor is FinCEN. And similarly other linkages as well, thanks to the Hindutva propaganda regime. We have seen that they keep on building nexus with far-right, particularly neo-Nazi organizations as well, because thanks to Savitri Devi's ideology, they are on the same page. We are going to talk about all these matters, and I'm going to introduce the panel as well, but first watch this short report that we have prepared for you.
The disclosures by EU Info Lab regarding India's dubious use of media, NGOs, fake identities, impersonation and fraudulent use of big names to malign Pakistan has been shocking and has further exposed the myth of Indian democracy and its championship of human rights and freedom. For 15 years, this fake media business was run by Indian actors in over 100 countries, particularly targeting the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, where it got 10 NGOs accredited so as to promote anti-Pakistan agenda, and in Brussels, where it fraudulently hoodwinked MEPs into criticizing Pakistan, especially on human rights. Indian Chronicles include a detailed investigative report of India's attempts to show Pakistan in bad light. The propaganda campaign, which was led by the Sriwasta Group and amplified by Indian news agency ANI, was launched in 2005 and is still ongoing. The actors orchestrating this network are directly tied to the creation of 3 informal groups in the European Parliament: the South Asia Peace Forum, the Baloch Forum and Friends of Gilgit-Baltistan, to organize press conferences and events in front and within the European Parliament to malign Pakistan. While India has been busy orchestrating anti-Pakistan rhetoric in the world capitals during the past 15 years, its game plan became more aggressive ever since Ajit Doval took over as National Security Advisor in Modi's first tenure. There is ample evidence to expel the facade of Indian democracy. As an immediate measure, Pakistan should demand the listing of Indian-sponsored fake NGOs in the Economic and Social Council so that such shoddy entities are denied access to the UN Human Rights Council.
Well, this report is self-evident. You can see what India has been doing. Of course, the report also mentioned Ajit Doval, but remember that this entire network was working since 2005. Those are the days when Pakistan came under a lot of propaganda pressure during the war on terror, despite sacrificing so much. We are going to talk about all these matters and more, and try to understand what exactly is going on and how to actually stop it. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by Osama Khalji, Director Bolo Bhi. This is an organization that focuses on digital rights. Thank you very much, Osama, for being part of the program. Next to him is Syed Muhammad Ali, Director of Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. Syed Muhammad Ali, thank you very much for being part of the program as well. On Skype, we are joined by Michael Kugelman, Senior Analyst, joins us from the US. Thank you very much, Michael, for being part of the program. And then we are joined by Dr. Saif Malik, Director, India Study Center, Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. Dr. Saif, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Just for full disclosure, let me also tell you that Dr. Saif is my teacher. Anyway, let me start with Michael Kugelman. Michael, you're looking at what is going on right now. On one side, we keep on seeing these revelations upon revelations. On the other side, there's this feeling, and repeatedly it has been flagged by the government of Pakistan as well, that since there is a transition going on around the world and in the US, perhaps India might stage some kind of false flag operation, and India might actually start some kind of conflict. Do you see any possibility of that at all?
Well, I think that if one were to try to think of any type of precedent where India stages some type of attack in order to distract from political turmoil at home, I'm not sure if one could identify any type of precedent. Some may disagree, but I don't know of any indication. But what I do sense is that in recent months, this has appeared to become a very common theme of Pakistani government messaging. It's not something that we're hearing for the first time over the last few days, this idea that India is going to try to stage some type of attack, maybe a false flag attack, whatever the case may be. Of course, I really have no idea at the end of the day. But looking at this in a broad scope, indeed, the current Indian government is one that has been willing to take as bold, risky steps that previous Indian governments have not. And you go back to issues like the decision to revoke Article 370, and you look at related things like that. But that's one thing. It will be a whole other thing to try to stage some type of to initiate some type of military operation against Pakistan. To me, seems unlikely, and I think that India likes to pride itself on being a status quo power. And my sense is that given everything that it has going on right now at home with the economic problems and with the turmoil with the farmers and other things, the last thing we'd want to do is to have to be saddled with that. I understand that people would disagree with me. Another thing to point out here, you talked in your introduction about this emphasis on the Modi government engaging in disinformation and things like that. But it's important to remember that if you look at the EU Chronicles, at the Disinfo Lab report, it alleged a 15-year effort, a 15-year disinformation campaign. Now, if it's true that there was some degree of Indian government involvement in that disinformation program, and the report does not take a position on that, but if we assume there was some Indian government involvement, this would go back to the
report does take a position on ANI's, role, and ANI is sponsored by the Indian government. But I'm going to come back to you because there are many things that we have to talk about. Let me bring in Dr. Malik as well. Dr. Malik, you are looking at these reports as well and what is going on. Do you share the sentiment with Michael Kugelman that India will not undertake such kind of conspiracy to destabilize the region at this time, sir?
I have no doubt about the Indian intentions at all. If you look back in the recent past, what happened inside India and what all is going on in India at the moment. There is a sequence of the events. First of all, in the beginning of this year, riots took place, minorities issued, the way the minority, irrespective of faith, they were butchered, it's all clear. Now, in the recent past, what happened at Ladakh, known to us, and internally, at the moment, over 5 lakhs farmers who have been joined hands with all those, irrespective of, these are not only Sikhs, Muslims and others are there. So they have virtually encircled and called in New Delhi. So the government is in a great state of frustration. So in this current situation, they may go for any such misadventure. We may call it false flag aberration, even the surgical strike. So they may go for it. Just to divert the political internal instability in their country and to keep those things aside, because they have always used only one card, right, that is the anti-Pakistan card in the movement. So right. I'm the first believer
India has this penchant for externalizing its internal conflicts and problems as well. So with your respect, with your permission, let me come to the studio and to my participants who are very patiently waiting for their turn. Osama Khilji, we are talking about this entire campaign to isolate Pakistan, do you think that there is some kind of comeuppance at all? International system will restrict this kind of activities or not? These are institutions which have exposed India's nefarious policies, which are not Pakistani, right? And this has happened, and yet the international media is hardly talking about it.
Yes, and I think it's quite absurd, and it just shows how deeply India's media relations, their soft image promotion, and their diplomacy has worked. But it's not all nice and lovely for India right now. So we're seeing Pakistan, for example, being successful in being elected to the UN Human Rights Council. We've also seen Pakistan successfully sponsor a resolution in the UN General Assembly calling for the right to self-determination be respected, and that's a blow to India considering the situation in Kashmir right now, and keeping in mind the resolutions of the UN that you already have existing since 1948. So in that sense, I think Pakistani diplomacy is going in the right direction, but it of course needs a much further push. And like you rightly pointed out, India has been at this since 2005. So what we're seeing is a lot of foresight and a lot of planning, and that's the kind of planning we need to look into, but at the same time not using the same tricks of the fake NGOs, of nefarious disinformation campaigns. And they even brought to life a dead professor through this campaign who had died in 2006, right? So this kind of thing I think is going to make India's reputation in the European capitals such as Geneva and Brussels, it's going to have a huge hit on them.
Right. Let me ask you another very important thing. Fake media or fake propaganda organizations are there, right? Internationally and as per Europe's laws, is it a crime to actually have such kind of organizations, or it is only something that is thought bad but is not an offense?
I'm not sure about it being a crime because, with information you can't be 100% sure whether this is disinformation, misinformation or information, or even if you can be, it's hard to prove, and the process takes a lot of nuances and various decrees, and that's why very few countries have introduced laws about disinformation or fake news, and they haven't been successful because it's so difficult to deal with the nuances.
But if a foreign actor is sponsoring such kind of propaganda, then it becomes something else, right?
Definitely, and especially when it's targeted at formal institutions that deal with international law. Exactly. So I think that will certainly have an impact, and Pakistan must push for that because we've been victimized by this campaign.
Right. There were 10 NGOs, fake NGOs, that were actually feeding misinformation to UNHRC. And this kind of campaign has been going on for quite some time. Sayyid Muhammad Ali, since we are talking about some kind of reprimand for these activities, what exactly can Pakistan do to expose A, these activities, B, ensure that anybody who's involved in such activities loses his voice?
Thank you, Farid. I think a very important topic, my compliments. I think what Pakistan needs to do is a lot, and in several domains. I think it's now common knowledge that the contemporary interpretation of international security environment is that of hybrid warfare that Pakistan is facing. And what India is essentially doing is trying to exploit all its elements of national power against all Pakistan's all domains. So that is something that we need to understand that in a comprehensive context. The popular view is that we tend to look at the escalation at the conventional level, or the situation on the LOC, the situation on the western border, the possible risk of nuclear escalation, but we don't see it in a comprehensive manner. That what India has essentially done since 9/11 is to craft a very careful narrative, which is bandwagoning with the US policy of that day, aimed at essentially 4 objectives. Number one, to diplomatically isolate Pakistan.
Number 2, to politically destabilize Pakistan. Number 3, to economically strangulate Pakistan. And number 4, to militarily divert and exhaust our capabilities internally and westwards.
Right.
So that was their strategy. Now, what has happened in the information domain?
In collusion with the US?
It aims to work with everyone, and I think this EU Disinfo Lab
basically co-opt their system.
Basically to use their naive assumption that, you know, Indian narrative has a space in the Western media.
Okay.
So they basically exploited that,
Right.
and that good faith. And I think it is very important for your viewers to know that even prestigious international media organizations like Reuters were also part of this scam. I hope not intentionally.
No, they have actually clarified they might have been duped.
Yes. So
you know, by ANI.
Absolutely. Very briefly, it is very important for your viewers to understand that this is not something that recently happened, and you rightly pointed out, it's a 15-year-old strategic communication project of global proportions. It had 5 layers, and they were mutually reinforcing each other, and the core was obviously raw, which was defining the terms, the objectives, and the strategic targets. And the cover agency was the Srivastava group, which was generating the narratives through a combination of 10 NGOs and think tanks, which were accentuated by the other organizations, the 10 other organizations, and also the 750 fake websites.
Right. But here's a very quick question for you. In addition to this, we are talking about one expose. And then when you talk about FinCEN actually, that actually flags this point that we knew the origin and the destination of transactions, and that's why, hang on, 1 billion only. There is a possibility that there was more shoddy activity going on. Does it worry you that there might be a bigger network, and these networks might have been smaller parts of that?
I think this is the most important question, Farooq Saab, because I think the international community has a responsibility to look beneath and beyond this media or the public perception domain. Because obviously it involves a huge, complex and well-organized, well-thought-out economic links. They have invested billions of dollars over the last 15 years, and the money trail needs to be tracked down.
And I'm totally with you, but here's a question that I'm going to leave with you, and I'm going to come back to you asking that, and that is, if India was doing this for 15 years, what were we doing? And that's a big question, because we have to, hold ourselves accountable as well. Michael Kugelman, once again, let me ask you regarding this entire, campaign that was exposed. I understand that your country is also undergoing this kind of attacks by various fake media organizations or foreign organizations, and it must not be a cakewalk for any country if they come under this kind of pressure or this kind of attack. Do you think that there is some kind of lessons here that can be drawn to ensure that no country is destabilized by a third country by using propaganda and such outlets?
I think that this Disinfo Lab report amplifies something that's long been known, and that's that disinfo is a thing. It's a reality, and that many countries do it. And certainly here in Washington, there's going to be a tendency to be much more concerned about disinformation campaigns that are hatched by U.S. enemies like Russia and China or Iran, for that matter. And I know there's been a lot of questions as to why there hasn't been more of a reaction here in the U.S. or in the West, for that matter. And I think that's it right there. Campaigns that would be perceived to pose an actual threat to your country or to your government, that's where you'd be most concerned. And of course, we know that the way the world works these days, a country like the United States is going to be a lot less concerned about a disinformation campaign orchestrated by Indians as opposed to one orchestrated by Chinese or Russians or Iranians or North Koreans or Pakistanis, for that matter, to be very candid. So, it's in an ideal world, everyone would agree, the world would come together and agree that, we need to stop disinformation no matter where it's coming from. But, the world is governed by matters of more so issues of shared concerns and morality and ethics and things like that, which is unfortunate. Just very quickly, you made a really important point, Farouk, about this issue about if this thing went on for 15 years, why wasn't it detected earlier in Pakistan? I know it's been a lot of the criticism has come out a lot, but that may be unfair to Pakistan in a way, just because I think it's so difficult to anticipate these types of campaigns, because the technology involved is always evolving, and so is the capacity of people and states to use that technology. And of course, social media has become so powerful and is so unregulated, it's very difficult to be able to keep up with these types of things. So I think the bigger question is, how does Pakistan or any country respond once these campaigns have been outed? Obviously, you want to try to preempt them. That's oftentimes difficult to do. How do you respond once they've been outed? And some of the more problematic reputation issues that have been challenges for Pakistan, just because it wants to react by saying to the world, well, look, this has happened, this is a really bad thing, it's a huge threat to us, and the world needs to come together to figure out how to get India not to do something like this again. But it doesn't work that way, just because many key capitals simply are focused on other things, or they don't see these campaigns from India as being as big of a threat as coming from other countries, and so on. So it's a really tough thing, and I think Pakistan is in a difficult spot. But hopefully, now that we do know about what's happened over the last 15 years, hopefully there can be some lessons for the experts that study these things.
Very interesting example, NYT's example. There's this podcast called Caliphate, and recently, just a few days ago, it turned out that the person they were actually presenting as an ISIS agent or a penitent ISIS agent, someone from Pakistani origin living in Canada, turned out to be a fake. And they actually aired that podcast, and later they have actually withdrawn and corrected themselves as well. There seems to be a pattern to corner Pakistan, and the concern then it becomes that it might be affecting the judgment of the Western powers, B, our profession as well, objectivity of journalists too. So what do you do about such campaigns, sir?
I think that I wouldn't say that there's efforts to corner Pakistan. I mean, you could argue that India has such designs. You could make that argument perhaps, but in terms of what people outside of that region would want to do, I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's just a matter of interest. That countries will always be most concerned about this manipulation and disinformation when it's perceived to pose a direct threat to them, right? It's only natural, I think. And I think that the example that you gave about that Caliphate podcast, that to me reflects a very different type of problem, and that's just bad journalism, so to speak. And unfortunately, that's something that is not restricted to any one country. It happens in many places, and the failure to do the proper due diligence, have things like that happen. I think that's really the issue there. And if the New York Times, which is viewed as the outlet of record,
I think that she is very objective reporter. Hang on. But my concern here is that when you talk about somebody was actually feeding misinformation to that journalist, and there it seems that somebody might have actually willfully deceived NYT. Let me go back to Dr. Saif Malik. Dr. Saif, you are listening to this discussion. Now, India's activities have been exposed. The question that I left earlier for Ali, Sayyid Muhammad Ali, let me ask you that as well. For 15 years, Indian propaganda campaign continued in Europe, and who knows where else. What were we doing, sir, as a country?
So this is a big question of self-accountability. I must say, because our, especially our embassies in the respective countries, in Brussels, in Geneva, and the observers sitting there. I think whenever they have observed any such like activity, I think the matter has to be probed in. For instance, once a demonstration was going on in Brussels or in Geneva about Balochistan, even on Kashmir, someone went to them and asked them, do you know about the issue? They said, no, we are the paid people. So at that time, the matter has been to be reported at the appropriate level. So as some action strategy has to be charged out at domestic level. I think still there is a time to call for action, especially for the firstly on the domestic front, and secondly, government of Pakistan must ask for the call for action about the international policy makers and the international institutions, especially those who matter on the health of affairs, whether it's a political institution or it's an economic institution, they must go for. For instance, 44 Indian banks were involved in the money laundering. So these things need to be reinvestigated. And secondly, this all propaganda, disinformation lab, this was not only disinformation, this was also sort of proxy war against Pakistan. So Pakistan, who itself is a victim of terrorism, which we defeated terrorism after making lots of sacrifices.
Right.
So
Dr. Saab, Michael Coleman actually brings up a very good point. That this was going on for 15 years. 2005 was the year when it was Congress Party's government in India. So this entire thing went on. I don't know whether it was raw sponsored, it was some raw adjacent, a policy, or merely Hindutva organizations reorganizing themselves. But the question right now is, at this moment, the present Indian government seems to have actually harnessed these tools in a very weird way that keeps on exposing India's soft power, right? So is there a possibility that Pakistan can actually capitalize on this as well, sir? Dr. Saab.
This is the time that Pakistan should capitalize it. For instance, it is just not, this is for Pakistan, I take it as a blessing in disguise, because in 14th November, Pakistan presented to the world the dossier, which was a reflection of the Indian nefarious design to malign Pakistan in multiple things, and how the terrorism was imposed on Pakistan, whether within from India, within from the third country, or from elsewhere. So, consequential to that, I think this is the right time Pakistan must of those words which matter to the international order, international system, and Pakistan must even ask the UN General Assembly, because this is something very, very serious.
Then, Dr. Saab, you agree that Pakistan perhaps will have to invest more in public diplomacy to actually push these concerns. Osama Khilji, earlier, Michael Kugelman said that maybe it is not right to blame Pakistani authorities for ignoring what was going on, given that there was technology involved. But when you look at the entire campaign, I mean, we are not talking about very complicated kind of technology here. You can develop websites, you can develop social media handles, and pretending to be media organizations is not that difficult. You just have to have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people sitting in an office and they can do it. Do you agree with Kugelman that we shouldn't be asking this question, what was Pakistani authorities doing for past 15 years, or should we be holding people accountable for this?
I think since the campaign was directed at Pakistan,
Right.
and the campaign was actively undermining Pakistan's international position in very important international capitals, Geneva and Brussels. So I think there is some responsibility on Pakistan as to at least investigate that what is being spoken about Pakistan at these forums,
Yeah.
who is behind it, and investigate a little more. But at the same time, because the campaign was so sophisticated that it's very hard to catch it. But having said that, within Pakistan, we've seen a lot of activity related to, this talk about hybrid warfare and information warfare happening. But what this report makes us realize that it's a lot more complicated than what we are told it is, right?
Okay.
So we're talking about, fake NGOs, we're talking about targeting speeches at the UN Human Rights Forum, and we're talking about very sophisticated diplomatic, campaigns. But at the same time, what we've been focusing on in Pakistan is simply social media and trying to clamp down on dissidents, accusing them of being anti-state.
Yeah.
Whereas what we're seeing is that such campaigns are a lot more nuanced and a lot more complicated.
And that was my natural next question, because when you actually brought up this issue, I was just thinking that if there was an activity that could dupe the Western powers for 15 years, is there a possibility that similar kind of activity simultaneously was going on within Pakistan as well? And remember, when you are talking about social media, of course, dissidents are one element that everybody is tired of, even in the US, even in India, elsewhere. But there are accounts, and you must have seen social media accounts, where people have the pictures of any political party's leaders, and they keep on pretending to be part of those parties and Pakistani. And when you keep on actually digging, you realize that the other person might be an Indian, or somebody who's totally there to actually foment violence or some kind of disagreement on social media. Do you think that kind of thing is going on?
But luckily people are not that stupid. So people don't
Really?
fall for it. Like you're saying, for example, when you see an account like that, and when you see what they're tweeting, it is so obvious where it's coming from, right?
Yeah.
But another advantage is that on social media, you have the opportunity of countering those campaigns, right? And of disproving them that they're wrong,
I'm sorry, I'm not going to call anybody stupid, but here's an example. 4 or 5 accounts actually were retweeted, even by Maryam Nawaz Sharif. Right? And later it turned out that they were not Pakistani handles at all. So that happens.
And that happens, right? And that's also part of these campaigns. So, for example, we saw Facebook and the Stanford Internet Observatory release one report last year and one this year, in which they took out these coordinated inauthentic behavior networks that were targeted at the Pakistani government within India, and at the same time you had very similar networks operating in Pakistan targeting India, right? So we're seeing that kind of competition going. So for example, there were groups being made in which people were duped to join and to talk about, Indian army or Pakistani army, and then get out information out of those, right? And those have been taken down. So yes, that's become a part of that, those networks. But on a larger level, if you look at social media, I think the ability of counter speech really makes it salient, where you're able to counter that information, counter campaigns immediately, and because on the other hand, when you try to censor that content, what you end up doing is censoring very important indigenous voices.
I get what you're saying, and the better answer usually is to come up with a better argument.
Exactly.
And a bigger voice, right?
Exactly.
But let me ask you, Sayyid Muhammad Ali, I left a question for you, and that is, I think you got plenty of time to actually mull over it. But let me also ask you, repeatedly we have seen, since Narendra Modi's government has come, we are not merely talking about 15 years of this activity. Look what Indian government has been doing within its 4 walls and in its neighborhood. Demonetization, NRC, CAA, Article 370, right? Confronting China or whatever went on. Pulwama. And then the kind of brinksmanship we saw just because Narendra Modi had to win an election, and he won it, right? again, a comment on whether people are stupid or not. Again, repeatedly this kind of activity goes on, and there is no check and balance internationally. How does it appear to you? But first, ask reply to the question that I'll get you.
I think there's a lot that Pakistan has done, but obviously there is a lot more that Pakistan can do.
Yes, qualify what we have done.
Yes. Yes. I think the environment in which this happened, let me reinforce my original point, that this was not just a campaign. This was a very well thought out, well funded, well planned strategic communication project of the Indian government. So what had happened was that it's not a coincidence that 2005 is the year when UN Human Rights Council was restructured in its current form. And this project, which was run through an organization called Srivastava Group, came into existence within a few months. So although the aim was to, isolate Pakistan, make it look bad internationally, dent its soft image, but the actual institutions which were being targeted are the premier international multilateral institutions like United Nations, European Parliament. So the onus right now is on Pakistan to gear up its diplomacy, not just at the public level, but through lawfare, but also engage our counterparts in Brussels, in Geneva, that these forums have been used through these funded fake institutions to harm the oldest agenda on the UN, which is Kashmir, and to badmouth and to blackmail and
I want to
party to that.
I hope you will allow me to scrutinize this argument that it was very complicated. A campaign.
It was very elaborate and very well thought.
Hang on. If there is a website that actually is peddling propaganda against you, you cannot actually identify that website and see who owns it, who is running it. These websites have remarkable structure. Look at them. They claim that they are covering the globe, right? And what they are doing is only 3 buttons are actually functioning. The country where they exist, the India, which is all great, and Pakistan, which becomes totally, a pariah of international society.
So basically there are 3-4 things that we need to do simultaneously. As journalists, I think the onus is on the institutions like Reuters, like BBC. Like BBC has done a good job, let's recognize that. And also they are also exposing the vulnerability or the naivety of their counterpart British institutions like Reuters. So the responsibility that they need to double check, they need to do fact checking. When you're talking about a website, who owns it? Is it registered somewhere? Does it pay taxes? How does it raise revenue? Who is funding it? Who are the sponsors? So I think there is a complex
90% of that work can be done by you or yours truly sitting in Islamabad, because there are websites, whois.com and similar websites that actually identify who is actually holding a company, who is actually managing websites.
And
with due respect,
even a BBC institution exposed it, because one person, Mr. Srivastava,
I feel I'm within my rights to actually ask what were we doing, and we have to actually examine that as well. Allow me to actually go to others. I am told that we are left with Michael Kugelman 3 or 4 minutes. Let us make 1 minute conclusion for each. Please go ahead, sir, your conclusion on this discussion.
No, I think that we seem to be mired in this rut. I don't know if it's called a rut, but just a reality where I think I would say that Pakistan will be on its own in its efforts to try to bring attention to these types of things that India is doing, and that it will struggle in that regard. How to get out of that? How could Pakistan be in a position where it may be able to count on more support from the international community? Well, I think that if India were to actually follow up on some of its most serious threats, I mean, let's say that India were to try to do something in AJK, if it were to try to follow up on its threats to to seize that region, that would make the world recognize that India is no longer a status quo power, and then I think perceptions could start to change toward India, and that could be an advantage for Pakistan. But that may be the very reason why, one of the reasons why India is unlikely to make a move like that. It knows that it has the world on its side on a strategic level, but if it were to go beyond that limit that it sort of stopped at to this point, if it were to actually engage in a preemptive, aggressive act, military act, that I think could really change the equation. It could be a real game changer in terms of Pakistan, how it's perceived and its efforts to get the world on its side in its goals to bring attention to what India has been up to.
Right, good point, well made. Let me go to Dr. Saif Malik. Sir, your conclusion.
Okay, let me make very quick remarks. First of all, those institutions or the organization which have a world fame, it is a matter of their credibility and their integrity. They must themselves start looking at their own affairs as well, that how they have been playing in the hands of fake media, fake NGOs, fake dead people, first thing. Secondly, it is again responsibility on the government of Pakistan to access to the governments, especially in Belgium and especially Switzerland, even Pakistan may access to UN, that they must probe into the matter at highest level, and at external level, government of Pakistan must initiate an inquiry. Those people who are supposed to take account of such things and report to government of Pakistan, the much that they had made earlier.
I'm sure that we have done out of time very quickly. Let me ask the other two guests as well, very quickly.
I think Pakistan should certainly leverage this report and the information they've gathered from it for its diplomacy purposes in the European capitals. Yeah. And at the same time, I think Pakistan has to make sure that this report isn't used to clamp down on basic constitutional rights of Pakistani citizens. Right. Because we've heard some government representatives go in that direction.
Right, but you have brought this point at the fag end of the program, so I cannot examine it. We'll actually discuss it another time. Sayyid Muhammad Ali, very quickly.
Very quickly, 4 things we need to do immediately. What we need to check the 2 things. This dossier and the expose of EU Disinfo Lab could be the first chapter only. Right. It could be the icing on the top. We need to dig deeper, come up with and track down and identify the money trail, and perhaps eventually build a case of FATF against India. Secondly, identify its links with Pakistani media domestically. That is very important.
Pakistani media?
Yes, so that we identify the 5th columnists within our media who are destabilizing Pakistan. And thirdly, when the Biden administration comes, perhaps armed with all these evidences, raise a fresh initiative with Washington so that they review the mistakes that Trump administration has made with New Delhi.
All right. On that note, we have to conclude the program. Sayyid Muhammad Ali, thank you very much for your time. Osama Khilji, thank you very much for your time as well. Michael Kugelman, always a great pleasure having you in the show. Dr. Saif Malik, thank you very much for your enlightening contribution as well. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. Propaganda continues, and we know that similar campaigns are undertaken by various countries. But here, the more you look, the more worrisome it becomes, because there is a possibility that similar kind of networks and these kind of campaigns might have had a negative impact between 2005 and 2020 on India itself. Look at how India is hardening its position and how it is getting radicalized. And luckily, while this is going on, we can also point out that there are Western institutions like Disinfo Lab and the organizations that actually came up with the FinCEN revelations. But similarly, another great thing that we saw during, the Article 370 situation and the lockdown in Kashmir, and that was that Indian journalists, not those who were reporting for Indian organizations, but those who were reporting for international media, they actually took it upon themselves to be the voice of conscience. And let me point out that if it is indeed a question about what India becomes in coming days, perhaps those people can also be great allies. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.